So before we sort of really dig into my experience of having a hair transplant and what to expect, I think it's worthwhile just taking a step back and just considering, is it actually a good idea to have a hair transplant? And, is it sort of right for you? And the only real way that I can answer this question is thinking about, I guess, the concerns I had before I actually had my hair transplant, because I delayed having one for a number of years. There's a few key things that kind of held me back, which I want to talk to you about, and why I shouldn't have worried about those things. And also, I guess now having, sort of been about 6 months after the hair transplant, what kind of regrets or anything that I have really, how do I feel now at this point? So I think this video is important just to kick things off really, as just like the overview really of my thought process before having the hair transplant and how I'm reflecting on it right now. So basically, I've shown you this picture from my wedding day, which was in 2010. So I was 29 at the time, and you can see my hairline's already starting to go here. Now, I still got some thickness, and I was still kind of able to style it, but you can see that the damage is already occurring in my late 20s. And then that only kind of got worse, as you'd expect, in my 30s. And certainly in my 30s, I was hearing about people getting hair transplants and, celebrities were doing it and things like that. But there was kind of a bit of stigma around it for two reasons. One was that, people were kind of going to Turkey and the industry was really getting going in Turkey. This is in the kind of 2010s, and some people were having like a botched job, and you'd hear horror stories about, oh my god, like you can get it cheap in Turkey, but it's all going wrong, and don't do it, and all this sort of stuff. And the other thing about it was there was kind of a bit of stigma around, it's not the sort of thing that men do. Traditionally, obviously, men have cared a lot less about their appearance than women. And although sort of women have been, doing things with their appearance, whether it's just minor things like wearing makeup right the way through to, various different surgeries and Botox and whatever for such a long time, it's not really been an accepted thing for men to do. So I kind of delayed it really from the point of view of being concerned about finding a really good clinic, because the last thing I wanted to do was become like a horror story, that you hear about in the news where someone's flown out and got a cheap hair transplant and it's all gone wrong and they've needed to have corrective surgery and all that sort of stuff. So that was my first concern. And my second major concern was what people's reactions were going to be. Just that sort of self-consciousness, I suppose, because the whole reason that you want to have a hair transplant is because you're already feeling self-conscious, right? I mean, for years and years and years now, I've been looking at every photograph that gets taken of me, and everyone looks at themselves and you kind of judge yourself, and sometimes you think, okay, you look okay in a picture, etc. But you tend to always fixate on those negatives, right? So the first thing I would look at, of course, on every photograph of myself was my hairline, and just like closing my eyes and thinking, oh God, is that what I've got to now? Is that where I'm at? And you just don't feel good about yourself ultimately, and it's not a nice feeling. So I'm just sort of sharing this with you because I'm sure this plays a strong factor in the reason why you're here, because you're probably sick and tired of looking at photographs and thinking, oh God, my hair doesn't look great in this, and it's aging me, and you just fixate on it, right? And so this is where I was at, and so all the way really through my 30s, it was kind of in the back of my mind, should I be getting a hair transplant? I know I'd feel better for doing it, but I don't really want the stigma attached to it, and yeah, how do I know I've found a really good clinic and things like that? And so I delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed, and it's only really been in my 40s that I decided, okay, I've got to make a decision because my hairline was getting worse and worse. Let's go to a picture. So this was just before I had my hair transplant, and you can see it's receded all the way back. I've got a tiny bit of hair sort of in the middle. I've got fair hair, so there's maybe a bit more hair here than perhaps you can see because it's sort of fairly blonde and things. But I was looking at photographs like this one, and it was just time for me to probably decide. Ultimately now, do I just go now for the full shaved head look? Because I was still kind of getting, scissors on top and trying to just style it as best I could, but it was just getting embarrassing really. You're just trying to cover it up, and it's just not going to work when you're as bald as I was, right? And I just had this niggle in my mind. I was just I'm not quite ready to never have another hairstyle again. And, you know, I think I probably would have looked okay with a full shaved look, but I just wasn't there. I wasn't ready to do that. I wasn't ready to just quite give in yet. So, you know, I made a decision, okay, what do I do about it ultimately? And I tried some natural remedies, and I'll talk about those in another video, whether they're effective or not. I mean, you know, long story short, you probably know yourself that when you get into the level of baldness like I had here, you know, the other remedies that you can use, like minoxidil and things like that, you know, taking biotin, they're only going to scratch the surface, really. They're kind of effective. They will help a little bit more. They will encourage more hair to grow, but they're definitely not going to give you like a full, nice, thick head of hair again. So I tried those anyway. They weren't successful. And so then, you know, then I got into the real research around, okay, so what is the industry actually like now in Turkey? You know, how well established are some of these clinics? And I was pleasantly surprised that many of the clinics now, or not many of them, but there are several clinics. There are probably 2 or 3 really, really high-end clinics there now that have so much social proof. Like, we're talking thousands and thousands of reviews now, 5-star reviews with full evidence of, you know, hair, you know, images before or images at the clinic and so on, and then 6 months, 12 months after. And the results were just, you know, fantastic. And so, you know, it became less of a concern really around getting a bad hair transplant. So I started to feel more confident and comfortable that, you know, perhaps I can actually go ahead and do this with more confidence. So then it was just a case of, okay, well, what about the stigma of it? You know, what about, you know, when I tell people how they're going to react and things like that? You know, it's quite a big thing in my mind. And hopefully you've not got as much concern about that as I did. But for me, that was one of the big things that kind of held me back, really. So, but ultimately, I just decided, well, look, you feel bad about yourself when you look at pictures like this. You don't feel good about yourself anyway. If you take a little bit of stick from your mates, you know, maybe they find it funny, you know, that you've gone and had it done or whatever, fair enough, but you can always fall back on the fact that you feel better about yourself anyway. So you're a lot more resilient, right? So if you're feeling good about yourself and you feel like you look much better, you're so much more resilient. And I'm glad I kind of came around eventually to that understanding, because that's exactly how I feel now. I will say I've not had anyone actually laugh about it anyway. The reaction has just been great, and it's just been nothing but compliments, to be honest. So I needn't have worried anyway. I mean, I'm happy to talk to people about it. I'm talking about it publicly on video. And if someone came up to me now and was laughing and joking about it, I could have a laugh and a joke about it myself. I'm like, oh, I know, I was all right. You know, I was all right baldy before, but, you know, I can style my hair however I want now, and, you know, I've got so many options, and it feels great. And actually, you know, you kind of throw it back at them, where they're like, yeah, actually, I don't really know the basis why I would make fun of someone who's now got like a really nice full head of hair, looks much better, feels much better about themselves. So it kind of says a bit more about them than it does about you almost. But I definitely needn't have worried. I mean, you know, there's a kind of painful process, as in like there's a harder process after you get the hair transplant for the first few months, because it's not actually painful, but it looks not very good. And I'm going to talk about this in detail throughout the videos. But after, you know, your hair's gone through a lot. The transplants go in, and then for me, I had shedding, which means it all then sort of falls out. And so that period of time wasn't great, and I didn't really want people to see that. So I was just able to wear a cap whenever I was out and about. You know, it was absolutely fine to do that, and no one even questioned it. So, you know, I was in a fortunate position where I didn't need to reveal really that I'd had a hair transplant until I had a really, really good covering of hair. And then the reaction kind of at that point was kind of, people were looking at me and like, you know, just kind of trying to work out, they're like, they know something's different, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it, right? And funnily enough, the main reaction for people was people saying, oh, you've grown your hair, looks really nice. They hadn't, like, no one had twigged that I'd had a hair transplant. People were just like, oh, you've grown it. As if I'd kind of by choice been like shaving it back or something, like, you know, having bald patches and stuff. I don't know, but people knew there's something different, but they were very complimentary about it and just like, oh, your hair looks really nice. And because I didn't want to I'm just kind of quite an open, honest person anyway, so I just kind of said, well, I'll be honest, it's not all entirely natural, and I've left it at that. I've not sort of said, oh yeah, I've flown to Turkey and had a hair transplant or whatever. I've just said, oh, well, you know, it's had a bit of a helping hand, and I've just kind of dismissed it as that, and that's it. They don't ask questions, then they just go, wow, it looks great. No one's actually, not a single person that I've spoke to about it has actually said, where did you go? And oh, what, you went to Turkey? And like, it's not even come up. And I've told, you know, a lot of people. And so overall, the main reaction I've had has been compliments, which feels really really nice. And I'd say more so than getting negative feedback, actually you're probably more likely to get like the odd guy that actually comes up and says, wow, your hair looks great, mate, where did you get it done? And you can tell they're thinking, I need to go and research this a bit more myself now. And so I think that's a more likely reaction, because it's normalised now. Another thing that really has struck me since having it done is that whilst, in the early days, maybe in like 2010, if you'd had one done, it would be a rarity and a bit of an oddity and things like that. Actually, the number of people now where I've sort of said, or they've noticed that I've had a hair transplant, and they basically will turn around and go, oh yeah, a friend of mine had it done, or like a mate of mine said, oh, my brother-in-law had it done, yeah, they're great, aren't they? And it's just like a normal part of the conversation now. Either you will probably know someone's had it done, or people that notice it will probably know someone's had it done. And this is where it's just become normalised now. And this is what I hadn't really appreciated just in the last few years, really. And having done the research, there's I think it's about 500,000 people a year are flying out to Turkey to have some kind of cosmetic work. Not just hair, but I mean, hair is a big chunk of that. But there's also, rhinoplasty and breast augmentation, and there's all sorts of things going on. So it's just, the chances of you knowing someone, or the people that knowing someone that has been out there and had something done are pretty high. So don't underestimate just how normalised this has all become as well. So a big part of what I'm trying to do here is to help you understand how to go from like this look to this look. This is at the 6-month mark, and I still think I've got quite a bit more growth and thickness to come, even at 6 months. But I want you to understand sort of, how the journey's gone for me, what to expect, in great detail. And you may not want this much detail. Maybe you're already thinking, okay, yeah, fair enough, I'm ready to sort of go ahead, etc. Well, you want to know which clinic and things, which I'll talk about in the next few videos, is choosing the right clinic and so on. I don't want people to delay like I did unnecessarily, because you won't have any regrets. I'm sat here now at 6 months and it just feels fantastic. Like, I'm so delighted with the way it's gone, with the results that I'm getting, with how I feel in myself. It just feels fantastic. And even though there is that healing phase, for the first few months, I'd do it many times over. I would not hesitate, to get this feeling where I'm at now. And I know that I've got decades, basically. I mean, a hair transplant really should last, I wouldn't say forever, because I'll probably go through another thinning phase as I get a bit older. So generally speaking, you go through 2 thinning phases. You've got one in your sort of, so it's different for different people, but for me it was like my late 20s, early 30s. And then generally you go through another one in like your 60s. So as long as I take care of this and, I want to look after it, but I shouldn't have any concerns until I get into my 60s. And even then, if I'm taking good care of it, it might thin, but it still might look really, really good. So I've got decades of this, and then I can make a decision depending on what happens, in future decades. What do I do at that point? But for now, I am just so excited and so delighted that I've got this period now of having probably a better hair than I've ever had, to be honest. And just being able to look at photographs. I mean, just recently we went to Disneyland as a family. This was only this was about 4.5 months this photo was taken with my family. It's one of my favourite pictures. Obviously, it's my favourite picture anyway because my family's in it. We had a fantastic time at Disneyland. But it's one of my favourite pictures of me, which, considering I'm in my mid-40s now, it blows my mind, really, that I can feel that happy with like a photograph. And so, it's just worth so much. It's just been worth so much to me. And as I say, I'm only at the beginning of my journey having hair again, and sort of how it feels and all the options that it gives you. But I've got so many options now, and I'm just feeling very, very happy with where I'm at, and extremely happy with the decision that I've made. So I guess the final part of the puzzle then is making sure you choose the right clinic. I'll explain to you the clinic that I used. They've got thousands, and I mean thousands, of 5-star reviews. You need to forget this idea that some of these reviews are fake and things. Well, I'm not saying that there aren't clinics in Turkey that have got fake reviews, but the clinic that I use has over 5,000 5-star reviews. They've got reviews of actual people from before during and after. You can't fake these kind of reviews. It's fully documented, right? So you need to kind of put that to one side and just understand what what a great clinic looks like, and then the final decisions really, I think, rather than being like held back by like the possible stigma and the things that held me back, final decision should just be based on, right, what might my hairline look like afterwards, and do I like what that might look like and what my hairline might be. And that's what I think will be the final step, hopefully, once I've walked you through all these videos. And you can make an appointment if you want. I can connect you directly with the clinic, and you can make an appointment with them to then really drill down what it might mean for you. Knowing really that you're at a point where you're comfortable with the idea of having a hair transplant. Hopefully I can kind of allay all those kind of worries and concerns that you might have, and you can just focus actually on what results you might get and what that might look like and how you might feel afterwards and that type of thing, which is that's I think what people should be thinking about is the final outcome, not worrying too much about the process and all those other worries about people's reactions, things like that, because it's just not really necessary to have those concerns, I've got to say. So I hope that's a helpful starting point, but I really think now let's dig down into more detail about my actual hair transplant and everything that I've learned and what the whole process actually looks like from start to finish.